we'll break off from that chat. There is Logan Sargent getting going again, but look where that front wing is, Martin.
I know, there could well be a safety car. A lot of debris on track here now on the racing line. We'll see where there's bits dropping off left, right and centre. Let's see what race control think about pieces of carbon fibre on the track. That might be the first chance, the first jeopardy of the evening.
Carlos Sainz, the leader, just going through turn 5. That's what happened to Logan Sargent. Down at turn 8, just wouldn't turn in on him, and he went straight on into the barriers. But the pack now are coming towards this corner, and where Logan Sargent had his incident. Now he's still going. He's going to try and get back to the pits. But as you rightly say, Martin, there's bits of carbon fibre flying off everywhere.
But the big bit looks like it's going to be a passenger all the way to the pit lane at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah, which is a good thing. Bernie Collins, to you.
Yeah, so just looking at where the two Ferraris would come out if there was a safety car now, they'd probably come out in or around Verstappen, so they're probably praying for a safety car, because if that happens, it'll null that advantage of the hard start that Verstappen has, and dropping this debris.
Yeah, the gap between Sainz and Verstappen, 16.6 seconds, but no indication from race control that we're going to get a safety car, and well done to Logan Sargent. Now we're going to get a safety car. This is going to make things interesting, folks. Sargent gets back into the pits. Well done to him for doing that. Ted Kravitz, let's head down to you. Can you see any movement around the garages?
Well, yes, there's movement around every garage. Logan Sargent has made a right mess. I don't think that car can continue. He's made a right mess of the floor. Ferrari are out in the pit lane. McLaren are out in the pit lane. Alpine, Mercedes just keeping a watching brief. I think Ferrari have most to lose in this, but they are out in the pit lane, ready for, I assume, Sainz.
Here they come then.
You've got a pit, haven't you? You halve the cost of a pit stop, and they can get onto the hard tyres and probably get to the end from here.
So if you're on a medium tyre, now's a good time to pit. If you're on a soft tyre, it could be a good time to pit, but can they double stack down at Ferrari? Russell is definitely coming in as well, and Charles Leclerc is coming in. They are double stacking at Ferrari. Expect Norris to come into the pits. Hard tyres going on. Max Verstappen just making his way around the final corner now. Can they get Charles Leclerc out, Martin, and not be delayed? Here comes Lewis Hamilton. They've had to hold Charles Leclerc till it's clear to get out.
He overplayed holding the pack up with a double stack. He needs to be careful he doesn't get a penalty for that. But he overplayed that and put himself at risk. I think he's got away with it.
Carlos Sainz continues to lead this race, and he's clear of Max Verstappen. That advantage of the hard tyre has been nullified by the safety car coming out on lap 21. So behind Verstappen, who's now second and didn't pit, George Russell. Sergio Perez didn't pit either. He's in fourth. Lando Norris fifth, Charles Leclerc sixth, then Lewis Hamilton in seventh. Fernando Alonso is down in eighth ahead of Esteban Ocon and Valtteri Bottas, and the safety car driver Bernd Mailander behind the wheel, and his passenger just waving Logan Sargent by because he'd been lapped during those pit stops.
I think that's worked out perfectly for Ferrari, hasn't it? I mean, Red Bull staying out on the hard compound. They know they probably almost certainly can't get a medium tyre and definitely can't get a soft tyre to the end of the Grand Prix. Ted.
But Charles Leclerc will be furious with having to be held there. That did not work out for Leclerc. Lando came in, and that was quick work for McLaren. Lando cleared Leclerc. Norris is ahead of Leclerc. Leclerc has dropped down to sixth at the moment, but it's behind the McLaren in that front-running group.
So this is Fernando Alonso. Thank you, Ted. Fernando Alonso locked up going into the pits. You're not allowed to cross that line.
No, you'll get a penalty for that. We'll watch it back as well. Leclerc overplayed backing up the pack and getting, unfortunately, that's a slam dunk penalty for crossing the solid white line. Leclerc overplayed backing up the pack.
What happened there?
We had to hold you for traffic.
And then Lewis Hamilton had to be careful coming in because George Russell was being serviced, and they were boxing two cars at Mercedes, and while Hamilton was making his way slowly in, Leclerc had to stay stationary for about 2 or 3 seconds too long.
Because the crew were ready. The crew were easily ready for a double stack Ferrari stop, but he was we'll have to try and measure it, quite a few seconds before he got to the Ferrari pit stop area. Remember, there's only one stop area per team. Before he got to the pit stop area, and that's what cost him 2 places.
Oh, Charles Leclerc That is a major moment that could be catastrophic to your hopes of finishing on the podium today. Race control have noted that incident with Fernando Alonso. You're not allowed to go over that curb and then come back into the pits again. You can see a 5-second penalty coming his way.
He crossed it twice, actually, didn't he?
Yeah.
So, there we go. I was going to say, the computer's showing Verstappen down in 6th, but he's 2nd.
He is definitely 2nd, and he's definitely behind Carlos Sainz. But remember, Verstappen has got to pit, Sergio Perez has got to pit, and the other cars around them, in fact, everyone bar Valtteri Bottas, have made their pit stop. If it's a one-stop race here, then the Red Bulls are going to lose out as the safety car is going to come in at the end of this lap. The Red Bulls are going to come out because they've got a 20-second pit stop coming their way. So whilst they hoped for a safety car at the right time and to go long in this race and make up places whilst others were pitting around them, that safety car on lap 20 allowed everybody else to make a cheaper pit stop. And that might have cost Red Bull dear in this race. There's still a bit of debris on the track there, which is probably just off the racing line.
Well, the pack are now pretty much together, so that we got Sargent is out of position getting round to the back of the pack. It should give a window for marshals to collect that piece of debris on the racetrack. And yeah, that was, and with such an easy entry into this next phase of the race behind the safety car, getting the hard compound tyres to the end.
What do you think is the plan for this?
The plan is to keep the pack together, so don't pull away. Should be doable.
Okay.
With Max behind on use the hard. And watch for debris still. Debris on track still.
Yeah, so keep him behind, back the pack up, cost Red Bull even more places when they do have to pit. All sounds very easy, but as you can tell from the onboard here, Verstappen will be slightly keener than a fast thing to get past that Ferrari.
Yeah, and the Ferrari Sainz was nearly wearing the Red Bull of Max Verstappen there.
So we've had a safety car then this year. That means every single year here in Singapore, the safety car has been called into action. Carlos Sainz, who has led every single lap of this race so far, is still out in front, but he's got a safety car restart to now worry about. And he's now allowing Bernd Maylander in that Aston Martin to get clear and to get back into the pits before he makes the jump. And there it goes, Carlos Sainz accelerating away towards the final 2 corners. We've got the green flags that are flying, and we can go racing once again, starting lap 23 of the Singapore Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz leads Max Verstappen. Well done, Carlos Sainz. Very good safety car restart from him. George Russell now running in 3rd, Sergio Perez 4th, Lando Norris 5th, and Charles Leclerc down in 6th after losing 4 places, pitting behind the safety car. Hamilton is 7th, Alonso 8th, and a potential penalty coming his way. Ocon 9th, Bottas 10th. Valtteri Bottas hasn't stopped in this race yet. And there goes Lando Norris. Norris looking for a move on Sergio Perez. He's going to go the long way round at turn 7. Can't quite get it, and almost gets collected by Charles Leclerc, who was steaming into that corner.
Who lost a place to Lewis Hamilton in all of that and is under pressure from Fernando Alonso.
Who has got a 5-second time penalty for crossing the line at the pit entry. So, Carlos Sainz leads. Max Verstappen now under pressure from George Russell. Just about holds him off. And it's sliding all over the place on those worn, hard compound tyres.
Yeah, new tyres against used tyres, and we know the Red Bull is not exactly biting into this racetrack. And all of a sudden, Verstappen under pressure from George Russell. And
Sergio Perez under massive pressure from Norris and Hamilton and Leclerc and Alonso. As through goes Verstappen, Russell, there's Perez, there's Lando Norris wanting to shunt that Red Bull out of the way. Better traction for those on the new compound tyres. There goes Lando Norris on Sergio Perez. There goes George Russell on Max Verstappen. Norris goes into 4th place. Russell goes into 2nd place. It's all swapping around, and the Red Bull's under big pressure. pressure.
Hamilton almost got through there as well, but didn't quite. Now shaping up for a run at Sergio Perez.
Out in front, Carlos Sainz has got it easy. Perez darts over to the left-hand side. Lewis Hamilton just tucks in behind him, going through turn 2. Charles Leclerc wants to make a move, nothing doing there. Fernando Alonso desperate to make a move. He's got that penalty coming. Liam Lawson, meanwhile, has got ahead of Valtteri Bottas and moved up into 13th place. And now we'll see some action going down the Raffles Boulevard as Bottas losing a couple more places to Hulkenberg and to Albon. Here comes Lewis Hamilton on Sergio Perez. Hamilton has gone inches ahead of Perez, goes into the corner and goes off the track and across the curb and stays ahead of Sergio Perez. Hamilton moves himself up into 5th place.
Stewards will be looking at that to see if it was all 4 wheels off and gaining a position. But nonetheless, the Red Bulls really struggling for grip on those tyres that are just 24 laps old.
They've been struggling all weekend, and at the moment they just haven't got the grip to keep pace with those around them on those fresh, hard tyres. The gap out in front, only 0.8 of a second. George Russell now has Carlos Sainz in his sights, and that's for the first time in this race, because before it was Charles Leclerc, this man here, who popped up into 2nd place. There's Max Verstappen losing another place. This time it's to Lando Norris, who moves up into the podium places, and that's 3rd. 2 Brits then in the top 3, 3 Brits still in the top 5. Carlos Sainz leads George Russell, Lando Norris ahead of Max Verstappen, Hamilton and ahead of Perez, Leclerc right on Perez's tail as they stream then round the final couple of corners. It's action aplenty now in Singapore. Forget the waiting game, the wait is over. This is what we want to see.
Fresh tyres, you can brake later, turn in a little bit harder and get on the throttle earlier. That is why they're simply driving past others, despite the DRS only just being enabled.
And that's the bad news for the Red Bull drivers at the moment. Now there's a...
Russell 1 second behind. If you keep the pack bounced up, he cannot do 2 stops. Russell cannot do 2 stops.
And now there's an extra 13 kilometers an hour of pace advantage if you're within 1 second. As we have a look at how Lando Norris managed to move himself ahead of the Red Bulls, and well, actually the first part where Charles Leclerc nearly collected him.
Yeah, and that's where Hamilton was sneaking through into that place. And what are we seeing here?
Well, this is Lewis just positioning his car to try and keep out a bit of trouble, and that's then going wheel to wheel with Sergio Perez, and quite how they didn't make contact there, I'm not quite sure. Brilliant driving.
Yeah, wily from Lewis. He knew he had to get out of that one earlier than later.
So Lewis Hamilton, we saw going off the track and gaining that place. He's had that lap time deleted for exceeding track limits. So whether that then is a knock-on to race control, I'm not quite sure. Did he gain an advantage by going off the track? Was he already ahead? That's what they'll be trying to work out, I'm sure, at the moment.
He completed the move, didn't he?
Hamilton ran off the track. He went up.
Yeah, we saw it.
Come on, give me the position now.
Sergio Perez thinks that position should be given back. Trouble is, Charles Leclerc is now ahead of him, so it's not like you can swap it over.
No, but if you do have to give that back, as I said earlier, you've got to give it back straight away before it becomes too complicated to do that.
Carlos Sainz then responding to the Ferrari orders of just, take your time here and back the pack up a little bit, but there's a massive gap between Russell and Norris. So I'm not sure if anything Carlos Sainz is doing is really helping his teammate much because of that gap.
Well, Sainz has got a bit of an issue here, hasn't he? He's got to go as slow as possible, but not be overtaken by George Russell,
who is flying on the hard compound tyre. Now he's got 2nd place. Well, he sensed the whiff for victory, I think, George Russell, here tonight. And Ferrari thought that he might be a big danger in this race, and he's certainly a big danger now. Ted, down to you.
The thing about Russell and Mercedes, they didn't do a long run on this hard tyre back on Friday, Crofty. So it's a bit of a voyage into the unknown for George Russell. They tend to go well on this C3 tyre. It is the hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so they're just sort of trusting their past experience with this C3 hard tyre, and it's working for Russell so far.
Lap 26 of 62. Stand by then for a congratulations Fernando Alonso moment, who might not be in the happiest of moods with that 5-second penalty. But he has now just completed 100,000 kilometres of racing action in his Formula One career. That's 2.5 times around the equator behind the wheel of a Formula One car during a race. What an achievement.
It is. but he's carrying a penalty for not quite making the pit lane, which is, yeah, it's slightly at odds with all that experience, isn't it? But he wanted to make the most of that in-lap opportunity behind the safety car. And a warning then to Kevin Magnussen for forcing another driver off the track. The black and white flag. Next up, another indiscretion, a penalty.
Kevin Magnussen down in 10th place and having a bit of a scrap with Pierre Gasly currently, and only just behind Esteban Ocon too. As Carlos Sainz has 0.7 of a second between himself and George Russell. There's a long, long way back then to the next man, who's Lando Norris, and we're on board with Lewis Hamilton. And that's Max Verstappen disappearing into Lewis Hamilton's wing mirrors. Neat move from Hamilton, who's now up into 4th. Red Bull really struggling now.
Yeah, Lewis, I was about to say Lewis really needs to clear Verstappen in a hurry, and he has done, because he's dropping off, he's dropping away from that leading trio, and he's done exactly what he needed to do.
Bernie Collins, down to you.
Yeah, so the big question now for Red Bull is, where do you go from here? You've done 26 laps on that hard. It's not restarted well from that safety car. You're hoping for another safety car, and even with that, at this stage, because the pack is still so compact, even with a safety car, Verstappen comes out in P18. So it's a lot of work still to do for Red Bull, and they've got to hope that this field starts to spread a little bit more than what it's currently at.
Yeah, I think whatever Red Bull simulations last night, they've had a... This is what we hope for, this is what could happen, and this is what we really don't want. And a safety car on lap 20 with the field close together was probably in the selection, Martin, of we really don't want this, do we?
Yeah, it was worst case scenario, wasn't it? And, you know, I'm sure some fans at home and watching this online, wherever, would have been frustrated at why they're going, you know, this is Grand Prix, don't go slowly. But that was entirely Ferrari's intention, to keep the pack tight and minimise any opportunity for Red Bull and others.
So Charles Leclerc is now half a second behind Max Verstappen. Meanwhile, Carlos Sainz seems to have just eked out a bit of an advantage with George Russell, who's now over a second behind him, and maybe Russell is having to drop back a bit because his car is getting a bit hot. This is getting a bit hot too. As through that little kink on that straight, the two cars go, and by the time they slam on the brakes into turn 7, Charles Leclerc is ahead of Max Verstappen, who's now 6th, and Leclerc up into the top 5.
How bizarre is this? Yeah, Red Bull was kind of in the way, wasn't it, on that restart? I know the tyres, but you know what I mean? It's looked like it could win anything from any position this year on the grid, and has done, and suddenly it just will not talk to this racetrack.
As Christian Horner says, it's essentially the same car with a few little wing adjustments for this weekend, the same car that's won the last 15 races in a row. And I know Formula One fans that there's a technical directive has been issued to the teams to say you can't run certain things anymore, flexible wings, we're keeping an eye on it. But everyone we talk to outside of the Red Bull team say, look, in all honesty, you're not going to get that advantage or disadvantage here in Singapore. If it's the same in Japan next week, that's a completely different story. But that technical directive shouldn't be hampering Red Bull here on this particular track. Watch out in 7 days' time to see if it is a different story or not. But I know there's a load of conspiracy theories flying around at the moment, and all we can do is go and ask people and try and find out the information for you.
Yeah, and I talked to some people who are not Red Bull, who absolutely know which way is up when it comes to technical regulations, and they said they didn't think that the regulation tidying up had affected the Red Bull.
Oh, and they're darting off once again. Fernando Alonso, and for that... Did he go the right way back onto the track?
Yeah, he's managing a lot. He's very slow. Guess he's trying to back us up.
Well, it's working. It is definitely working, because behind George Russell, they are catching up a little bit. Lando Norris only a second and a half behind George Russell now. Alonso's under pressure from the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, and he's just about holding on to it. That Aston Martin seemingly struggling on the hard compound tyre. He did go the correct side at the bollard.
He did everything right. He didn't gain a place there. He didn't fail to lose a place by going around there, so I don't think he'll take yet another penalty for that.
Just making sure that he was going the right side of the bollard, not the left side.
So was he, luckily.
That's right. But Alonso is certainly struggling. Since the restart, that Aston Martin just doesn't have the pace that it had to defend against the Alpine when they were both running the medium compound tyre. Unless, of course, Alonso is doing what he has done here in the past and backing up people himself to then give it the sprints at the later stage. Just looking down here, that's Oscar Piastri on Pierre Gasly trying to make a move. We can now ride on board the second youngest driver on the grid.
Yeah, Piastri made a couple of places up during the safety car, and of course 2 Red Bulls ahead of him as well, but haven't yet pitted. So a chance of some World Championship points for the young Australian.
And just behind him, the Kiwi, Liam Lawson, running in 13th, trying to score his first points in Formula One, which no one has ever managed to achieve at a Singapore Grand Prix. We've never had a maiden point scorer in the 13 previous races that we've had here. Hulkenberg's lost out a little bit, running down in 14th. His teammate Kevin Magnussen, there he goes, still running in the points, but only just. Esteban Ocon trying to make the move on Fernando Alonso, who's just getting a bit detached at the moment to Sergio Perez.
And once again, then Sainz nowhere near fastest driver on the track. This is a little bit like a teamer ahead in football, isn't it? Just keep kicking it back to the goalkeeper a little bit.
I'm a West Ham fan, don't mention going ahead and then just kicking it back to the goalkeeper. It wasn't a great day yesterday. Ted, down to you.
Well, what we really need then is for George Russell to go on a virtuoso run down one of the flanks.
2 seconds, Ted.
Keep an eye on these tyres. These will go to the end comfortably. Especially how Sainz is driving, he just manages big
Go on
time.
then, George, make a run at it. Go down the side of the field and try to whack one, hit it, shoot, George, shoot. You might get a goal, or whatever we're talking about in motor racing terms. Go for it.
Ted Kravitz displaying all his football knowledge there in one full sentence.
But what Ferrari need to do is for Charles Leclerc to get back involved to try and help out Carlos Sainz win this race. But it's not working. Lewis Hamilton is dropping Charles Leclerc by a 10th or 2 per lap. Just a quick update on Haas, if you're following them. Kevin Magnussen lost 1 place in the, was okay in the safety car, but wasn't good for Nico Hulkenberg. They did stack the 2 Haas cars. Hulkenberg lost 3 places in that safety car phase.
This is great now. Carlos Sainz leads this race. We're on lap 31. We're at half race distance. But look at this quartet that are battling it out at the top. Sainz, Russell, Norris and Hamilton separated by 2.5 seconds. I think we got some action coming our way here, Martin.
Yeah, there's plenty more jeopardy left here in the second half of this Grand Prix. As you say, Norris and Hamilton with Sainz management out front. And it is a surprise in a way, I think, as Ted eloquently puts it, have a go. If he's going that slow, cruise up to his gearbox and send one up the inside, but it won't work as simply as that.
I think George might need to do that in a minute, because it's not like he can back off anymore, because look, there's Lando Norris, there's Lewis Hamilton, and they're just going to be swallowing him up like a man at an all-you-can-eat buffet who's got his hungry appetite on. George is now dropped back a little bit and out of DRS range, which is not going to help him too much in his defensive moves.
Well, what also Sainz is doing here is helping overheat all the cars behind him, as Leclerc then also starts catching back up as well. So we're going to find ourselves with a 5-way race anytime soon.
And that's Max Verstappen, who's currently on his own in about 6th place.
It's like driving on ice. Understood.
Who's feeling the Bambi effect, I think, on that one, in terms of driving on ice in a race, by the way, that has seen him being overtaken on track during a Grand Prix for the first time in the 2023 season. Did you want to come in, Bernie Collins?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Verstappen radio comms is pretty bad for a lot of other people on the race there. They've already done 11 laps on that hard tyre, 30 laps to go. Verstappen's only done 30, so they'll have to do 40, so 10 more, and he's saying the tyre is dead.
What help does it make? The track will rubber in a bit, Bernie, and of course they're on half tanks now, so they've got a lot less fuel load.
Lighter fuel. The big worry will be if they get a safety car towards the end of the race, can they restart that hard tyre, even if it's only a few laps? They won't want to give up the positions, most likely, especially if there's only a few laps at the restart. But can the hard, when it gets cold, when it gets decked, last?
The prediction, Bernie, before the start of this race is that the tyres were going to degrade greater than the fuel effect, in terms of lap times get quicker when the fuel kind of burns off and the car gets lighter, but the tyres will degrade more. So that's not what a strategist or a driver ever wants to hear, is it?
No, it's not. You want your lap times to be getting quicker as the fuel comes off. And what we're hearing from a lot of drivers currently out there as well is that the track improvement's coming into that. The track improvement has been quite big, particularly in that first stint.
But that was if they were going to be flat out, Crofty. Yeah. You need a calendar to time them at the moment rather than a stopwatch.
Well, Carlos Sainz is pace managing. Those behinds are having nothing of it. And this is Lewis Hamilton, who can see Lando Norris and his rear wing, and Lando Norris can very much read all the lettering on the rear wing of the Mercedes of George Russell, who's probably got good eyesight and enough of a decent eyesight to read what's on the back of Carlos Sainz's car as well. 2 seconds the gap between the top 4. That's Oscar Piastri in the other McLaren, stuck behind Pierre Gasly.
It's very easy to get mesmerised on a street circuit that close to another car.
I want to go for this win. Yeah, we understand. We're on the same page, mate.
The trouble is, they're all on the same tyres, aren't they, out front at the moment? So, yeah.
When you say mesmerised,
you can easily get drawn in just following another car. You're absorbing the hot air, you're absorbing the exhaust gases. It's hot and sweaty and tiring out there, and it's actually quite easy to make a mistake. These guys are world class. They shouldn't do that, but you just have to make sure that you're still, you know, neat and tidy and doing everything right with your car, because you can be out of this Grand Prix in a heartbeat.
It's that mental fatigue that now comes into the equation. Nico Rosberg told me once that he used to train on a treadmill. He'd be on a 15% incline, doing like a 7km/h power walk, and he'd play round about 7 hands of poker while he was doing that, to exercise and stimulate the mind as well, because that's the important thing at this stage of a race, especially under the oppressive conditions that we get here in Singapore.
Yeah, and you have to go up close to the walls, and suddenly the car gives you a little slide that you're not quite ready for. But they're all ahead of the game on that, from what I can see.
He didn't tell me if he won all 7 hands of poker or not, but knowing Nico Rosberg as we do, I bet he did. That's the battle going on for the final points place currently. Kevin Magnussen's holding on to it. Pierre Gasly is all over him and all over his rear wing, but can't find a way past. And that is Sergio Perez, who's got Fernando Alonso right behind him.
And not only has he got Alonso, he's got Ocon, Magnussen, Gasly, Piastri, Lawson, Hulkenberg and co. There's quite a queue behind Sergio Perez.
And at the moment, what Alonso needs to do, so let's just have a little look here. Magnussen defending down at turn 8. Piastri joining the scene of that one. What Alonso needs to do is to back people up a little bit and then go for the sprints in the final stages of this race to try and get that 5-second gap that he needs to protect what is currently 8th place, but he might be thinking 6th place when Verstappen and Perez stop. He's got a 5-second penalty for crossing the line at the pits entry. Ted, down to you.
Crofty, I don't know if we saw Magnussen pushing Gasly off track to defend that P10. Did you see that?
No, but we saw the black and white flag.
So I'm told by Alpine that Pierre Gasly still very angry on the radio and wanting some action from the stewards about what he felt was a clear break of the rules. Magnussen just forcing Gasly off. Gasly not happy about it, and only 0.4 of a second behind. Gasly's going to try to get that P10.
Fernando Alonso wants P7 at this moment in time, and he can see the struggles that Sergio Perez in his 250th Grand Prix is going through. There it was, little twitch through that final corner, just lacking grip, that driving on ice that his teammates was talking about. It seems to be affecting Sergio Perez too. And if that Aston Martin actually had the pace down the straight, then the Aston Martin would be ahead of the Red Bull.
It would. And if it was even faster than that, he'd be leading the race. But I'm looking at his steering wheel. His steering wheel doesn't look straight, but it might be the camera angle, which I hate in a racing car. The steering wheel is not quite. It looks like it's slightly right-hand down, but that might just be the angle of the cockpit camera there.
Aston Martin racing with just one car in this race as Pierre Gasly finally gets ahead of Kevin Magnussen. Lance Stroll recovering from his nasty crash yesterday in qualifying and feeling very sore and stiff today, and they want him to focus on his recovery in time for the Japanese Grand Prix next week, so they withdrew him from the race. And while I said all that, Kevin Magnussen's back ahead of Pierre Gasly. The battle continues.
Yeah, we've got sort of two little groups really around the circuit, haven't we, with Logan Sargent out on his own, making...
This is Gasly into turn 7, and that was forcing potentially another driver off the track, and is that why the places then swapped back again?
Well, his front axle was ahead of the Haas's front axle, so I think, ooh, look at that, Perez hanging onto that one. So I think he had earned the right to some space with his front axle considerably ahead there.
Still out in front, Carlos Sainz. The man in second, George Russell, the last non-Red Bull driver to win a Grand Prix in Sao Paulo, of course, last season. Lando Norris yet to, but it'll happen one day, win the Formula One Grand Prix. And Lewis Hamilton, who's well, he's just got 103 wins to his name in his career so far. Just 103. And would dearly love a 104th after going all season last year without a victory for the first time in his Formula One career. His last trip to the top step of the podium coming in Jeddah 2021. And there is Kevin Magnussen. And Magnussen is now starting to struggle a little bit. His teammate, Nico Hülkenberg, is past him. Alex Albon is surely going to be past him in a matter of moments as well. There goes Alex Albon past Kevin Magnussen, who was in the points and is now down in 15th place and about to get past, you think, by Zhou Guanyu, who's on the medium compound tyre now. He has pitted twice in this race.
That's a horrible lap for Kevin Magnussen, isn't it? In terms of race positions. Fernando Alonso then shaping up against the back of Sergio Perez.
Somehow Perez is staying ahead of this Aston Martin. But you're not quite sure why, given some of the squirms that we're seeing. That is where Magnussen started to get into trouble, outbraking himself going into turn 1. That's how Pierre Gasly got past him, and we can see what things look like here. With Gasly going into turn 7, Magnussen obviously got back ahead, and then he just outbrakes himself into turn 7.
Yeah, he locked the rear axle, didn't he? Like pulling the handbrake on, assuming your handbrake's on your rear wheels, of course. But yeah, I mean, again, if Sainz pitted now, he would come out 15th. That's still, despite the pack now in 2 groups, it's still a problem for if you do need to pit, when you come in.
You can see a stripe on Sergio Perez's front tyres. You can see Fernando Alonso going for it into turn 7. He just about got his braking done, so he didn't go off the track, but he lost momentum in doing so. Round the outside goes the Alpine of Esteban Ocon. Fernando Alonso trying to make the move and now trying to hang on to the place. Sergio Perez 7th. Ocon is now ahead of Alonso, and it looks like Alonso's lost a couple of places as they try and squeeze through into the next corner, and they came within the width of a 10-pound note of making contact. The Alpine and the Aston Martin. Alonso going for attack, losing out in defence.
I never imagined there was enough space for 2 Formula One cars side by side into that nipped braking zone of turn 10. Brilliant driving all round.
That is going to annoy Fernando Alonso massively. That is going to absolutely delight Esteban Ocon, who kind of felt that he got the rough end of the deal when they were teammates at Alpine. And I'm sure that's going to have a bit of a sigh of relief from Sergio Perez as well, who just earned himself about a 10th of a second of breathing space while the battle went on behind him.
Fastest man on track last lap around, Pierre Gasly, now homing in on that little battle as well with Ocon, but Alonso between them.
Well, with George Russell now just over 6/10 behind, now might be a decent time, and I think Carlos Sainz is rather hinting at that. Got to ask, what has happened to that Aston Martin car in recent races? Fernando Alonso, who finished a brilliant second in the Netherlands, was a disappointing 9th in Italy and is currently running 9th here, and just not even against a Red Bull who's been running those tyres for 38 laps, able to make an impression.
Yeah, I think they've just been out-developed by other teams, haven't they? We know McLaren, for example, have had a big step forward. Mercedes are understanding their car better as well, and they turned up with a great car in the early part of the season, but others have moved on. Ted?
So just an explanation, courtesy of Mercedes, as to why George Russell isn't having a go at Carlos Sainz, is that Sainz is doing such a brilliant job of managing it. He's just backing off enough, but not enough.
2 seconds, Ted.
Sainz reporting he still has a second of pace in hand.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, because Mercedes making it clear that you need 2 seconds a lap advantage to overtake, and Sainz is only backing up about a second. So Mercedes doesn't have 2 seconds per lap pace on the Ferrari, even with the Ferrari saving its tyres. And they point out, Mercedes, that the only people passing anybody are pretty much everybody on a Red Bull, which has 20 laps more on its hard tyres. So they're just going to have to hope they've got better tyre life, Mercedes, than Sainz in front of them, and see how the race develops.
And all Red Bull can do now is get their elbows out, as Verstappen and especially Perez are doing, and hope there's another safety car.
I was going to say, are they praying at this moment for a safety car to come? Is that their only real chance in this race? It certainly looks that way. Now, Fernando Alonso was struggling to get past Sergio Perez. Esteban Ocon's going to give it a go now, and he's getting closer and closer all the time, but not quite close enough. But has he got some momentum now to try and get some decent traction and get past at turn 8? He can't really squeeze around the outside there, but that looked clever from Esteban Ocon. That looked neat from Esteban Ocon. That's magnificent from Esteban Ocon, and up into 7th place in his Alpine. Perez continues his struggles and continues his defence against Fernando Alonso.
He forced Perez to go offline and drive defensively, and then just picked him off when the time came.
We've seen those two come a cropper before when overtakes have been on the cards, Ocon and Perez, when they were teammates at Silverstone at Force India. Perez is struggling once again for traction, and Alonso this time should make the move stick, and make it stick quite easily. He is at least 2 car lengths ahead before they put on the brakes, turn right at turn 14, and by the time they do that, Alonso can see Ocon disappearing into the distance. They need to bring Sergio Perez in at Red Bull because he's losing place. Hand over fist, metre after metre, there goes Gasly on him.
And Red Bull getting ready to pit their 2 drivers. It hasn't worked out. They're going to have to put some fresh tyres on those cars,
which Sergio Perez will be delighted about. Now, they might put on a set of soft compound tyres here to try and go to the end. Perez is pitting, and he's got some work to do to come back into the points from where he's going to end up, and I dare say he's going to end up round about 17th or 18th in this race. Once again, medium tyres for Sergio Perez.
Yeah, well, if he puts presumably they've got to bring Verstappen in as well, otherwise the next thing is Perez will be undercutting him and ahead of him.
Well, there goes Sergio Perez behind Logan Sargent, down in 18th place. One person hasn't, or 2 people haven't pitted yet. Valtteri Bottas down in 16th. Verstappen currently running in 6th. And George Russell has made his move on this lap towards Carlos Sainz. They are going to bring Max Verstappen in for his pit stop at the end of this lap. When I say make his move, the gap now under a second, as George Russell had enough of this waiting around and hanging around, and is it time to give it some hustle in that Mercedes? He wants to go for the win here. Carlos Sainz trying to protect his lead and his advantage. Sainz with 1 win in his career. Silverstone last year. George Russell with 1 victory himself in Sao Paulo.
So the Red Bulls will end up 14th and 15th after this pit stop. But they have got, other than Logan Sargent, they have got quite a lot of clear track in front of them. Just 60 kilometers per hour, 40 miles an hour. That is why it's such a slow pit stop here.
It must feel horribly slow for any F1 driver coming in. Brand new medium compound tyres onto Verstappen's car. He can't see what's going on the track because there's a pit wall in the way. But if he could, he'll see that Zhou Guanyu's gone through, Kevin Magnussen's gone through, and if he's lucky, he'll get out ahead of Valtteri Bottas. He will get out ahead of Valtteri Bottas because Bottas is pitting too. Out into the night time comes Max Verstappen once more. 15th for him, 18th for Perez. Bottas has just pitted, so Perez will potentially make up a place there. And let's go back to the top end.
Yeah, it was an interesting comment, wasn't it? I thought he'd say 2 seconds of that he got in hand. That's how it feels to George Russell. And certainly it's the sort of lap times we were expecting to see. More than a second faster than this, but Sainz then just parking his car neat and tidy. It's tactical. It's what's required.
Yeah, 2.4 seconds, the gap between the top 4. At one stage, it's 2.8 seconds now. It has got shorter. It's not really got much larger than that. But they're all still in contention here. Lap 41 of 62. And no... Sorry, Martin.
So Red Bull then still very much having to rely on a safety car now to bring them back into contention. We'll keep an eye on what kind of lap times they're doing.
Freddie Collins, have you been picking up some lap times? Have you been looking for
It was very interesting. The top 5, I think, have a very interesting strategy problem ahead now if there is a safety car. We know that the McLaren have that, the Mercedes have that extra medium tyre to use, but they are too close to stack their cars. The top 5, if there was a safety car now, could all come out ahead of Ocon in P6. So it's very interesting Ferrari with Carlos Sainz did. I do believe the 1 second in hand that he suggested, and before the pit stop, Verstappen was 2 seconds slower than that. So the hard tyre, when you get 30 laps on it, is slow. So the safety car decisions going forward are very important.
Yeah, and Verstappen is about to put in Perez in the 38 much, much faster. Verstappen will be equally as fast when he completes a flying lap.